There is a quiet sensation that appears without warning. Not failure, not chaos. Life keeps moving. Days happen, responsibilities are handled. Still, something inside carries the impression that nothing is truly advancing, as if time is passing, but the starting point remains the same. There is motion, but no real displacement. For many people, this doesn't show up as a crisis, quite the opposite. Routine works. There is work, commitments, small accomplishments. Everything appears stable enough. The discomfort forms elsewhere, in the subtle perception that days accumulate without producing a sense of progress. Tomorrow doesn't frighten, but it doesn't excite either. It feels like a repetition of today. In everyday life, this sensation appears in small details. Plans that are always postponed. Ideas that feel promising but never urgent. Changes that are considered, then quietly delayed. Not because of obvious fear or lack of ability, but because something internal never fully organizes itself into direction. Intention exists, but it rarely becomes momentum. This state often goes unnoticed because it doesn't interrupt life, it accompanies it. And precisely because of that, it is difficult to name. Life isn't stopped, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere either. This feeling is often explained in simple terms: lack of ambition, comfort zone, fear of change. But these explanations rarely reach the core of the experience. Many people who feel that life isn't moving are not inactive. They are busy, functional, responsive. They solve what appears. The issue isn't lack of movement, but lack of felt direction. From a psychological perspective, progress doesn't depend only on visible action. It depends on an internal sense of continuity. When days are spent responding to what is immediate, without time to sustain choices or deepen decisions, the mind registers effort, but not advancement. Life keeps functioning, but it doesn't organize itself around something that feels like it's growing. Over time, attention becomes trained to deal with small urgencies, responding, adjusting, fixing. These demands occupy just enough mental space to prevent longer pauses, the kind where larger questions might form. There is no conscious refusal to change. There is simply a constant flow of small demands that leave no room for something new to take shape. As a result, life doesn't feel blocked. It simply keeps rotating around the same axis, day after day, without perceptible movement. There is a specific point where this sensation consolidates. It often appears when something requires a real decision. Not a minor choice, but one that asks for continuity. A path that would need to be sustained. A habit that would require consistency. A step that once taken would reorganize the days ahead. In these moments, life seems to slow internally, even as everything continues moving externally.
From a psychological and behavioral standpoint, change doesn't depend only on desire, but on the ability to remain with a direction after initial energy fades. Beginnings are usually charged with motivation and expectation. The middle, however, requires tolerance for doubt, repetition, and uncertainty. For many people, this is where something quietly breaks, not dramatically, but silently. The mind begins to return to what is familiar, what already works, what is already structured, not out of conscious fear, but out of internal economy. Sustaining something new consumes mental energy, and when that energy is already scattered across multiple demands, the new begins to feel too heavy. Life continues moving, but always along the same paths. Over time, this way of functioning produces a silent but persistent effect. Weeks pass filled with small resolutions, yet empty of clear milestones. There is a sense of being constantly in maintenance mode, adjusting details, putting out small fires, organizing what already exists. Very little is built with enough continuity to generate a genuine sense of progress. This pattern creates a particular kind of fatigue, not intense exhaustion or obvious discouragement, but a diffuse weariness, paired with the impression that a great deal of effort is spent just to keep things in place. The mind remains occupied with the immediate present, while larger decisions stay suspended, not from incapacity, but because they never seem to find the right moment to be sustained. There is also a subtle emotional effect. When life doesn't move, even while functioning, a quiet doubt emerges about one's internal rhythm, not a direct comparison with others, but a private sense of misalignment. Something feels out of time, not delayed enough to alarm, not advanced enough to reassure, just stagnant in motion. As this state persists, something begins to shift in how time itself is experienced. Days seem to pass too quickly, yet leave little impression. Weeks accumulate without clear markers. When trying to recall what was truly meaningful, memories appear blurred, not because nothing happened, but because few experiences were sustained long enough to become internal reference points. Psychologically, the sense of progress is tied to permanence. What is carried through with continuity gains emotional weight. What is rushed through, between interruptions, loses density. When life is lived mostly in reactive mode, the brain records effort, but not construction. There is constant movement, but little sense of a story being formed. This often produces a quiet unease, the feeling that something important is always being postponed. Even during busy periods, there is a sense that something essential is missing, not from lack of trying, but from lack of sustained direction. Life remains active, but without leaving the internal mark that usually signals advancement.
Perhaps the most important point is not what is missing, but what is rarely sustained. The feeling that life isn't moving often arises when choices never remain long enough to reorganize daily life. The impulse to change appears, intention forms, but before it gains structure, attention is pulled back to what is immediate. The urgent replaces the important, and the important is endlessly postponed. This doesn't happen due to laziness or lack of desire. It grows from a learned pattern. First, relieving immediate tension, keeping everything running. Remaining with a direction requires tolerating uncertainty, repetition, and delayed results. For many people, this creates a silent discomfort, not strong enough to stop them, but enough to redirect them. Observing this pattern changes how stagnation is understood, not as personal failure, but as a mode of functioning that sustains itself. When this is noticed, there is no instant shift, there is space, and space allows choices to stop being merely thought about and slowly begin to be inhabited. When does life feel like it's moving, but not going anywhere? Here, these patterns are observed calmly.